I'd like to thank Cindy Levy for the wonderful reading today. It's good to see her again. And of course, Gary Lynn Floyd and our CSL music team for the great music that supports the message. We continue our 2023 spiritual journey with our series, Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness, according to the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse. And today we explore kindness. This is already week 6 of our journey. Wow. And like the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse, we still have plenty of time to discover who we really are and what has meaning for us, where our home lies. Each week is independent, and you always walk away with some tools so that you might delve deeper into understanding your life and what brings you joy. Before I turn it over to Reverend Catherine, here's your affirmation for the week. What is the one choice you might make today to be kinder to yourself, to be more aware of the kindness that sits quietly beyond all things, and to look for kindness in your life and out in the world? One more time. What is the one choice you might make today to be kinder to yourself, to be more aware of the kindness that sits quietly beyond all things, and to look for kindness in your life and out in the world? So here's Reverend Catherine with our message.
Good morning, my friends. It's so great to be with you again today as we explore the spiritual principles in that sweet little book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. I heard a story about a woman who was standing at a bus stop, and she had just cashed her tax refund check, so she had more cash than usual in her wallet. She was a bit nervous, so she was looking around, just making sure that she was safe, and she noticed a shabbily dressed man that was standing close by. As she watched him, she saw another man walk up to him, hand him some money, and whisper in his ear. She was so touched by that act of kindness that she decided to do the same. Feeling generous, she reached into her purse, she took out a $10 bill, and she gave it to the man, whispering in his ear, "Never despair, never despair." The next day, when she went to the bus stop, there he was again. But this time, he walked up to her and handed her $100. Dumbfounded, she said, "What's this?" And he said, "You won, lady. Never despair paid 10 to 1. Now, I'm not going to promise that every act of kindness you perform will pay you 10 to 1, but I will promise that there's always a tremendous payoff. Something good always comes from being kind.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Kind.
What a wonderful intention, don't you think? There's a radio commercial for Motel 6 that I've been listening to for years. I'm sure you've heard it. It ends with, "I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you." I always love when I hear that commercial because whenever I hear it, I find myself smiling. It was really well done, but more than that, it says Motel 6 has set an intention to make you feel welcome. And isn't the idea of welcoming one aspect of kindness? Kindness isn't always easy. It's something that often requires setting an intention, something that requires working on. It's something that you have to put energy on. Tom Hanks recently did an interview about his career and the book he just released called The Making of Another Major Motion Picture Masterpiece. And in that interview, he talked about many of his movies. When he talked about the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is about Fred Rogers, someone we might very well think about when we think about kindness, the interviewer, Ezra Klein, asked Hanks about kindness. Tom says because he couldn't ask Fred himself, he decided to ask Joanne, Fred's widow, how Fred managed to be so darn nice all the time. Well, Joanne said it wasn't easy, that he actually worked very hard at it. It was a practice. Like so many things in life, if we want to get better at something, we practice. We make it a practice. We do it over and over and over again, and it gets easier. It becomes a part of us. And even though it gets easier, we don't stop. We keep doing it because it keeps serving us. When I talk about spiritual practice, I often remind myself that there's no such thing as yoga perfect. I have a yoga practice. It's something I do every day, and it becomes a part of who I am and how I live my life. In 1982, the writer Anne Herbert scribbled on a placemat in Sausalito, California, "Practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty." Well, that placemat went viral, as we would say today. It sparked a movement. For years, people put bumper stickers on their cars that said, "Practice random acts of kindness." And while I love that idea, it bothers me a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a lovely gesture to pay a toll or buy a cup of coffee for the car behind you. Give someone on the street lunch money. That's all good. And I certainly wouldn't discourage you from doing those kinds of things. And I'd like to encourage you to practice intentional acts of kindness. Actually looking out into the world for places that you can sprinkle a little kindness, and then letting that still small voice within you tell you how and what. Henry James says, there's 3 things in life that are important. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. And the third is to be kind. Some construction workers were building a high-rise across the street from a hospital. And as they were working, they noticed a little girl standing in a 3rd floor window. She watched them for hours every day. Well, one day, one of them waved to her, and she waved back. The next day, the little girl held up a sign that said, "My name's Lisa. What's yours?" So the next day, the men came to work with poster board and markers, and they each wrote out their own sign. "My name's Bob. My name's Joe. My name's Harry." And then, "How old are you, Lisa?" And the next day, the little girl held up a sign that must have taken her hours to make because it had beautiful flowers and rainbows all over it. It said, "I'm 7. How old are you?" Well, this continued on for several days. One day, they noticed, though, that Lisa wasn't standing in the window. So at lunchtime, one of the guys called the hospital and asked for the 3rd floor nurse. He asked if she could tell them anything about Lisa. The nurse told them that Lisa had taken a turn for the worse. And so that afternoon, they made a sign and sent it up to the intensive care nurse to put on Lisa's wall. Several days passed, and then a sign appeared in the 3rd floor window. "Lisa passed away this morning. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for caring." In 1 Corinthians, the Bible tells us that love is patient and that love is kind, that only good can come from being kind to one another. Kindness can change our world, one person at a time, one step at a time, one act at a time. So before starting a conversation, before entering a room or performing a task, ask yourself, where is my heart? Be conscious of where you're coming from and set an intention to lead with an open heart, to be just a little more kind. The Dalai Lama said, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." We've all heard this before, and it resonates with us because it points to something at the very core of all humanistic paths. Instinctively, we know that if we just dedicated our lives to kindness, we would be serving peace on earth. War could be eliminated, hunger and poverty too. We'd be serving social justice, and we'd be healing the environment. As John Lennon says, imagine. So I invite you to imagine the world we would live in if we all committed to cultivating kind hearts, to being more kind and more loving to each other and to ourselves. Kindness is a strong, genuine way of being, and there are specific qualities that we can work on to create an atmosphere or a feeling of kindness. Qualities like warmth and trust, patience and loyalty and gratitude, honesty and forgiveness and compassion and connection, service, humility, empathy, flexibility, respect, and joy. Sometimes we might only see one of those qualities, but other times there's a magnificent interplay among several. And what a joy that is to see and be a part of. Religious science tells us that when we give anything from our heart, that what we're really giving is love. And that when we give love, we are stepping into that abundant flow of life. It's a circle with no beginning and no end, and we become a part of it. It teaches us that there's only one life, and that life is God's life, and that life is our life. So when we give, who are we giving to? We're giving to life. We're giving to that one life. A Course in Miracles puts it simply by saying, we only give to ourselves because there's only one of us. But that's not why we give. There's something innate in us that knows when we're in alignment with the truth of ourselves, when we give from our heart, when we come from that place, that's where kindness comes from. That's giving love. That's giving with an open heart. Mother Teresa says, kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. They're like a pebble that's thrown into a pond. Acts of kindness can ripple outward, touching and inspiring so many. And not only does it impact others, but it has a powerful effect on us. Amelia Earhart said, no kind action ever stops with itself. One kind action leads to another. Good examples are always followed. A single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up and make new trees. The greatest work that kindness does to others is that it makes them kind themselves. So when we're kind to others, we're helping them be more kind, and we're also opening ourselves up to experiencing more of it in our own lives. You know, I talk to my own mother a couple of times a week. She's one of the kindest people I know. I always tell her I want to grow up and be just like her. But being kind to ourselves, she always says, be kind to Catherine whenever I share my troubles or concerns with her. And it's a good reminder, especially when I'm beating myself up about something, because sometimes it's hard to see that we're seeing the world through a filter of pain or fear. That never happens to any of you, does it? When times are difficult, it's also difficult to be kind to ourselves. We tend to go down a dark alley, to be self-critical and to engage in negative self-talk. We've all heard that voice in our head that tells us we're stupid or worthless or incompetent. It certainly doesn't feel good, but here's something interesting. According to new research from Oxford University, being unkind to ourselves has implications on our health. The research has shown that the threat response that can result from self-criticism can damage our immune system. And now researchers say that being kind to yourself can actually switch off this response and thereby lower the risk of disease, many different kinds of diseases. Researchers seem to think that the most important finding from this study is this. Self-compassion exercises activate the body's parasympathetic nervous system, which scientists are calling the rest and digest antidote to the body's fight or flight response. This helps slow our breathing and our heart rate. What's more, this study directly associates increases in parasympathetic activity or self-care with reduced cortisol levels, improved immune system functioning, effective emotional regulation, less physical inflammation, better overall physical and psychological health, and there was a measurable improvement in cardiovascular health. So being kind to yourself is literally good for your heart. In our book, the mole tells the boy, being kind to yourself is one of the greatest kindnesses. And we often wait for kindness, but being kind to yourself can start now. So the practice here is to notice when we go down that dark alley. And as soon as you notice, stop and back up. Get out of there. Remind yourself that you're not the voice in your head. You're not the voice that is criticizing or condemning you. And when you find yourself ruminating on something, doing that woulda, coulda, shoulda thing, it's a call to self-care. It's time to be kind to yourself. It's time to practice self-compassion. It's time to back up and get out of that alley. And as Ernest Holmes says, when we change our thinking, we change our life. Remind yourself that you control the conversation and find a way to reframe it in a way that feels natural or authentic to you. Try to talk to yourself in an encouraging and warm voice like you would a friend who needs support. Sometimes I tell myself, now, Catherine, despite how this looks, despite how this feels, God is right here, right now. And everything always works out in the end, because if it's not the end, it hasn't yet worked out. Practicing loving kindness toward ourselves is the best way I know to illuminate the darkness that comes with facing tough times, and we all have them. Life is not so much about what happens to us, but rather it's how we handle what happens to us. And sometimes being kind to ourselves means reaching out so that we can remember that we're loved and supported by others. A few weeks ago, when Reverend Larrye talked about bravery, she talked about having the courage to ask for help. Well, asking for help can also be a way of being kind to yourself. None of us has to carry the load by ourselves. Sometimes leaning on others can help us remember our own truth. You know, kids can be pretty mean, especially girls. Growing up, when I was in school, I used to get teased a lot because I had naturally curly hair. The kids called me all sorts of names, curly Q and frizzball, even poodlehead. I'd go home crying and my mom would say, kill him with kindness, honey. You know, while killing someone wouldn't be my definition of kindness, I know it's a play on words and I understand and did then understand the concept of kindness and killing someone with kindness. I remember reading a story about Abraham Lincoln. He was being criticized by a woman for speaking kindly to his enemies. You should be destroying your enemies, she said. President Lincoln responded, Madam, do I not destroy my enemy when I make them my friend? In Luke 6:35, the Bible tells us, love your enemies and be kind. Do good work, expecting and hoping for nothing in return, but considering nothing lost, despairing on no one, and your reward will be great. Jesus is telling us here, practice kindness. A small boy went to summer camp, and the third day in, he received a large package of cookies in the mail from his mom. He ate a couple, and then he put the rest of them under his bed. The next day at lunch, he went to his tent to get a cookie, but the box was gone. That afternoon, a camp counselor who had been told about the theft saw another boy who was sitting behind a tree eating those stolen cookies. So the counselor went to the boy whose cookies had been stolen and said, Billy, I know who stole your cookies. Will you help me teach him a lesson? The boy agreed, and so a few days later, the boy asked his mother to send him another box of cookies. And it came a few days after that. Now, said the counselor, the boy who stole your cookies is down by the lake. Go down there. Don't say anything. Just share your cookies with him. But the boy protested, he's the thief. I know, said the counselor, but try it. See what happens. Half an hour later, the camp counselor saw the two boys coming up the hill, arm in arm. The boy who had stolen the cookies was earnestly trying to get the other one to accept his jackknife in payment for the stolen cookies. And the victim was just as earnestly refusing the gift from his new best friend, saying that a few old cookies weren't that important anyway. In this thing called You on page 136, my buddy Ernie says, the mind must reach a place where it no longer remembers the past with anxiety or looks to the future with uncertainty. It focuses instead on the divine goodness, the loving kindness, and the givingness of God. In our book, the horse exemplifies kindness, and he's a character to emulate in our day-to-day lives. He tells the others, nothing beats kindness. It sits quietly beyond all things. Let's look at that idea. As I think about that, I'm reminded of one of the teachings of Zen Buddhism, that all humans are essentially Buddhas, that we have that Buddha mind within us, but we get distracted. We forget our true nature. This idea suggests that when we take a closer look at ourselves, we can expect to find loving kindness already there, just waiting for us to tap into it. And that it will remain with us as a possible expression whenever and wherever we go, no matter what we're doing. It's there always and in all ways. I just love that idea. It's kind of like how the sun is always up there, whether we see it or not. If it's hidden by cloud, or if it's moved a little bit around the earth so that we can't see it, it's still there. It's always there. Kindness sits quietly behind all things, and it can change everything. There was once a man who walked his dog every Sunday morning around a lake near his home. Week after week, he saw the same elderly woman sitting at the edge of the water with a small metal cage. One day, his curiosity finally got the better of him, and he approached the woman, asking her what she was doing. He noticed that the cage was actually a small trap, and she had 3 small turtles in it. In her lap, there was a 4th turtle that she was carefully wiping with a sponge. The man greeted her and again asked, if you don't mind my asking, what are you doing with these turtles here every week? Well, the woman smiled and explained to him that she was cleaning their shells, because any algae or scum that builds up on a turtle's shell makes it difficult for them to absorb heat, and it slows them down. It can also corrode their shell and weaken it over time. Well, the man was impressed. The woman continued on, and she said, I do this every Sunday morning to help these turtles. And then the man asked, but don't most turtles live their entire life with algae on their shells? The woman agreed, yes, that's true. And then the man said, well, then you're kind to do this, but are you really making a difference if most turtles don't have people around them to clean their shells? Well, the woman laughed as she looked down at the small turtle on her lap. Young man, she said, if this little turtle could talk, he would tell you that I am making all the difference in the world for him. Little things, little gestures, little acts of kindness can mean a lot, and they add up like those ripples in a pond. They go forward, they expand. I like to say, the more we see, the more we see. You see, opportunities to be kind are all around us. So what can you do today that will make someone's life a little brighter? What about tomorrow? Can you pick up the phone and call someone who's lonely? How about delivering chicken soup to a friend or making silly faces at a fussy child in line at the grocery store? Carry bubbles in my purse just for that purpose, to cheer up a fussy child, to surprise someone, bring a little joy into a moment. I invite you to incorporate intentional acts of kindness into your life. Make it a spiritual practice. Do something kind on purpose with no expectation of return every single day. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that the payoff will be huge. So I'd like to close now with one last quote This one's from the Buddha. He tells us to fashion your life as a garland of beautiful deeds. Can't you just imagine that? Can't you imagine around your neck a beautiful garland of acts and deeds of kindness? So let's pray. Infinite power and presence of love, the source of all kindness and all good. I lean into this right here and right now, knowing that it lives and expresses itself and has its being in, as, and through my life, in, as, and through my experiences. That I am spirit walking and living on this planet, just as I know each person here on this planet is, each person within the sound of my voice, and each person on this earth, each human, each animal is an expression of that one life, that one love that is that infinite power and presence of God, that living spirit of God Almighty. And in this place of knowing, in this place of connection, I speak my word of blessing. May we all step into this day with our eyes wide open, looking for good, looking for opportunities to be that presence of love, to be more kind every day. May we recognize the opportunities to be of service and to give with an open heart. May we be a part of making the world a better place. May that still small voice within each of us help us to see when we venture down those dark alleys and choose once again, but more quickly than before. Let each one step out into the world with clear intention to be more kind, to be more loving, to be that presence of love, to enter the world with a kind heart, and to do intentional acts of kindness, knowing that we all live in that abundant flow of good, in that circle that has no beginning and no end. And so it is with a full, grateful heart that I celebrate kindness in the world, in myself, and in all of those I encounter. I see it spreading across this planet like a blanket of love. And I release my word, calling it good because I know that it is. And so it is. Amen. Until next time, my friends.
And once again, Reverend Catherine was just fabulous. Such beautiful stories and quotes. And don't worry, she still has a couple topics to cover in this series, so she'll be back. Since Reverend Catherine ended with such an inspiring, beautiful prayer, let me just take this time to remind you of your affirmation for the week. How is it I so willingly and effortlessly am kinder to myself, am more aware of the kindness that sits quietly beyond all things, and look for kindness in my life and out in the world? Your challenge for this week is to be kind to yourself and to find kindness out in the world every day. I hope you're enjoying this series as much as I am. And if you feel like you're being inspired, please consider making a donation. I'm so very grateful to our congregants who continually support us so that we can have this beautiful music and these beautiful messages. So enjoy our offertory song.